Some photographs capture a single moment, others change the way the world remembers history. At some moments, I need no words, yet they leave millions speechless. The Vietnam War was fought far beyond the battlefield. It changed not only Vietnam, but America as well. In March 1965, the skies over Tây Ninh echoed with the roar of helicopter engines and the relentless sound of gunfire. In this photograph, a U.S. helicopter flies low over the jungle, firing into the trees to support South Vietnamese troops engaged in combat below. It was a period when the United States was expanding its direct combat role in South Vietnam, with helicopters becoming a defining symbol of the war's highly mobile tactics. The dense forests near the Cambodian border were not only fierce battlefields, but also the setting for search and destroy operations that often lasted for days, as both sides relied on the rugged terrain to gain a tactical advantage. This photograph captures a group of American soldiers standing beside a mass grave after the fighting had ended. War is measured not only by battles fought or territory gained, but also by the lives lost in its wake. Regardless of which side they belong to, every grave tells the story of the human cost of a long and brutal conflict. Behind every military report are families forever changed and communities left to bear the scars of war. In this image, U.S. Special Forces and military advisors move deep into the jungle, roughly 100 kilometers from Saigon, searching for enemy supply bases. Missions like these often lasted for days, forcing troops to navigate dense vegetation, harsh weather, and the constant threat of ambush. Their objective was to locate supply depots, transportation routes, and hidden base camps concealed beneath the jungle canopy. Yet in such an environment, distinguishing military targets from nearby civilian areas was often an extremely difficult task. A South Vietnamese soldier lies seriously wounded after an ambush in a sugarcane field near D-1E9C Hoa. Historical accounts indicate that his unit was searching for guerrilla fighters when it unexpectedly came under attack. The towering sugarcane and intricate network of canals created ideal conditions for surprise assaults. This photograph illustrates the brutal reality faced by soldiers on the ground, where an ordinary patrol could turn into a desperate fight for survival within moments. Smoke and flames rise near the Perfume River after U.S. aircraft dropped napalm on a position believed to be occupied by enemy forces. Napalm, an incendiary weapon capable of generating extreme heat, was used to destroy vegetation, defensive positions, and suspected enemy hideouts. During the early years of the conflict, it became part of efforts to deny cover and disrupt military operations. However, its use also sparked widespread international controversy because of its devastating effects on people and the environment, making it one of the most enduring and disturbing symbols of the Vietnam War. At a busy intersection in Saigon, Buddhist monk Thich Q.U. letter 1EA3, NG-1E9C, sat calmly as flames engulfed him in protest against the South Vietnamese government's policies toward Buddhists. Hundreds of witnesses watched in silence, while international journalists captured the moment on camera. The photograph quickly appeared on the front pages of newspapers around the world, drawing global attention to the political crisis unfolding in South Vietnam. More than half a century later, it remains one of the most influential photographs of the 20th century. In this photograph, a U.S. Air Force A-1 Skyraider dives toward its target before releasing a series of 500-pound bombs onto an area believed to contain enemy forces. The Skyraider became one of the most widely used attack aircraft of the Vietnam War, thanks to its heavy payload and long endurance over the battlefield. Missions like this were typically flown to provide close air support for ground troops or to strike suspected supply depots, base camps, and transportation routes. A South Vietnamese soldier covers his nose as he walks past the bodies left behind after the fierce battle at the Michelin rubber plantation. The fighting resulted in heavy casualties for both American and South Vietnamese forces. With its endless rows of rubber trees and strategic location, the plantation became the scene of repeated and intense combat throughout the war. Rather than showing the battle itself, this photograph captures its aftermath, a haunting reminder that the silence following gunfire can sometimes be more powerful than the battle itself. Above the waterways of the Mekong Delta, Eagle Flight helicopters circle overhead to support South Vietnamese troops during operations against guerrilla forces. The region's maze of rivers, flooded forests, and vast rice fields presented unique challenges for military operations. Helicopters allowed troops to move quickly across difficult terrain, while providing fire support whenever needed. Yet the same landscape also exposed pilots to constant danger, as enemy fire could erupt from concealed positions along riverbanks or beneath the dense vegetation at any moment. This is one of the most heartbreaking images of the Vietnam War. A grieving father cradles the body of his child after a raid on his village. No matter where the fighting occurred, civilians often bore the greatest burden of the conflict. Beyond the statistics of battles and casualties were countless families whose lives were forever changed. This photograph serves as a powerful reminder that every conflict leaves behind deeply personal tragedies that numbers alone can never fully convey. U.S. Marines come ashore at Da Nang, marking a major turning point in America's involvement in Vietnam. What had begun as an advisory mission was rapidly becoming a large-scale combat operation that would reshape the course of the war. Inside a military hospital in Nha Trang, a nurse comforts a wounded American soldier. Away from the battlefield, doctors and medical staff fought another battle every day, saving lives and treating the physical and emotional wounds of war. 8 American soldiers who lost their lives are prepared for their final journey home beneath the U.S. flag. Images like these reminded the American public that every casualty represented a family forever changed by the war. Smoke fills the area after a bombing at the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. The attack demonstrated that even heavily guarded installations were vulnerable, highlighting the growing intensity and unpredictability of the conflict. For C-123 aircraft sprayed defoliants over dense jungle during Operation Ranch Hand. The mission aimed to expose hidden supply routes and enemy positions, but its long-term environmental and human consequences remain deeply debated. High above the battlefield, B-52 bombers release massive payloads over suspected enemy positions near Tây Ninh. Their overwhelming firepower became one of the most recognizable features of America's air campaign in Vietnam. General William Westmoreland speaks with American troops near Bien and Hoa. As commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, he believed that increasing troop numbers and firepower would help secure victory in an increasingly complex war. Thousands of students and residents marched through Berkeley, California, calling for an end to the Vietnam War. As casualties increased, the anti-war movement gained momentum and became a powerful force in American society. Following heavy airstrikes near D-Stroke Letter 183 and Gizai, wounded civilians are evacuated from the battlefield. The image serves as a reminder that beyond military objectives, war often leaves its deepest scars on ordinary people caught in the conflict. A U.S. A-1E Skyraider dives toward a military target before releasing white phosphorus bombs, often used to create smoke screens or mark targets. The weapon became highly controversial because of the severe injuries it could cause. Australian soldiers escort a captured female guerrilla after a military operation. The Vietnam War involved not only American and Vietnamese forces, but also troops from several allied nations. Women also played important roles throughout the conflict. Under the intense heat of South Vietnam, a U.S. Marine carefully gives water to a fellow soldier. Amid the violence of war, this simple act of kindness reminds us that survival often depended as much on comradeship as on combat. On one side, a child leans against a father detained on suspicion of aiding guerrillas. On the other, the body of an American paratrooper is lifted onto a helicopter. Two very different stories, both shaped by the same war. U.S. Special Forces fire on a small riverside hut, believed to be an enemy position along the Mekong Delta. The maze of rivers and dense vegetation made every mission unpredictable, and every hidden structure a potential battlefield. A CH-46C night helicopter erupts in flames after being hit by enemy fire. Helicopters transformed the way America fought in Vietnam, but flying low over hostile territory also made them highly vulnerable to attack. An American soldier directs a flamethrower toward the entrance of a cave believed to shelter enemy forces. Throughout the war, underground tunnels and cave systems became some of the most difficult positions to locate and attack. As the war intensified overseas, thousands of demonstrators gathered outside the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Their protest reflected the growing divide within American society over the cost and purpose of the Vietnam War. The expression on this American soldier's face reveals the emotional toll of months spent in combat. Beyond the battlefield, many troops carried the weight of fear, fatigue, and memories that would remain long after the war ended. A U.S. A-4E Skyhawk attacks the Than Hoa Bridge, a strategic transportation link. Throughout the war, bridges and supply routes became frequent targets, as both sides fought to control the movement of troops and equipment. The photographs you've just seen capture only a small part of the Vietnam War, a conflict that lasted nearly 2 decades and left a lasting mark on Vietnam, the United States, and much of the world. Each image tells a different story, from battlefields and military hospitals to anti-war protests and the everyday lives of soldiers and civilians. Viewed together, they reveal not only the history of a war, but the immense human cost it left behind. More than half a century later, these photographs remain powerful historical records, helping future generations understand one of the most influential conflicts of the 20th century. Thank you for watching.